Rights to freedom is dead. We're coming to get our check.
Black first, my brothers and my sisters. Welcome to the Afro Elite YouTube channel. I'm your host, Afro Elite. What should be known is the most horrific atrocity to ever happen in recorded human history is American chattel slavery. That's undeniable. That's a complete fact. That's not an opinion. Records, documents, history, nothing compares at all. Nothing even comes close to the horrific atrocity that was the American chattel slavery. The whole period, the link, everything. Nothing compares to it whatsoever. But you always have people who are trying to belittle it. And why they're doing this is because right now we're making a really big push. The movement for reparations is really gaining a lot of momentum, a lot of steam, a lot of notoriety. So what they're doing is they're trying to go to the base of the movement, which is finding justice or getting justice for the atrocity that was chattel slavery to the degree that we can through reparations. So in order to debunk or try to come in between reparations to try to block reparations, you got to go to the source and try to belittle slavery. So you have this guy, his name is John Stossel, or I guess that's how it's pronounced. And then he brings a guest. He has this guest, some author that nobody's ever heard of before, named Wilfred Reilly. So John Stossel and Wilfred Reilly are having this little interview where they're trying to belittle American chattel slavery. So we're going to look at it. We're going to debunk everything they're saying because it's very easy to debunk this. So that way we have the argument because we know the talking points. So anytime we see stuff like this, we know exactly how to respond to it. Copyright disclaimer. Under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
Of slavery.
The original sin of slavery.
Today, Americans are taught when it comes to slavery, America was the worst.
The Atlantic slave trade from Africa to the Americas was different from any other type of slavery.
The United States didn't inherit slavery from anybody. We created it.
American slavery was worse because
the slaves were reduced to property. They were chattel property. No other system of slavery did that except American slavery.
That's complete nonsense.
Wilfred Reilly is a political science professor and author of Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me.
Generational slavery, like if you're the son of a slave, you're a slave. That was extraordinarily common. Slavery around the world was slavery.
Books like this.
Now, okay, let's stop that. What he's saying is generational slavery was extraordinarily common. Not really. There are points in history where there were slaves, but the thing is that a lot of the slaves, they came from, if you lost a war or you were battling some tribe and you took their prisoners and they were used as slaves, or somebody had owed you something and it's like indentured servitude. With that, a lot of the systems, they still had rights where, okay, you are a slave and you have to work for me. You have to do what your master says, whatever the case is, until your debt is paid off or until, I guess, the end of your life. It's not like you're a slave. Your children are your child. Your baby is a slave. Your baby is my slave. If your child grows up and they have a baby, that will be my slave too. If I have a child, my child will own your child in the future or own your children's and descendants in the future. That was not a very common practice at all. Notice he can't really name any places where that went on outside of America. We know that happened in America, and I'm not trying to justify slavery anywhere else in the world, but that practice of generational slavery where if you have a kid, that kid is my slave, and then that kid is my slave, and then any kids after that, any descendants after that is my slave, and then my descendants still own your descendants. That is not something that was super extremely common. He's lying. So lie off top. Initially, he just opened up the floodgate with lies.
unfinished nation.
Yeah.
Slaves in Africa were kept unfree only for a fixed term.
No is the short answer. Most of the slaves taken by these sort of players would be either kept as slaves for their entire life or, more likely, sold to the whites and the Arabs in 2 years.
Today, partly thanks to the New York.
Okay, even when he says they would be kept as slaves for their whole life, it's not as if they didn't have any type of rights whatsoever. In slavery, they were all considered, in American slavery, the slaves were not even considered human beings. They were literally not considered human beings. They had no type of rights whatsoever. Slave masters got to do anything they wanted to. They got to violate their slaves, whether their slaves was adults or children, male or female. They got to do that. Do you understand that George Washington's teeth was not made of wood? It was made of his slaves' teeth. They used to take, because his teeth was like falling out and rotten and all. So he would lose his teeth. They would take the teeth from his slaves and put it in his mouth, make dentures out of teeth from his slaves. That stuff is not things that happened other places. And I'm not trying to belittle what happened in any other place, but these are specific things that are recorded and well-known, documented in America. So if a slave had to live the rest of his life still paying off his master or serving for his master, the rights that his master had to follow, his master still had to follow certain laws when it came to how to treat certain people and do certain things. There were still crimes that you could do even to your slaves. In America, it wasn't like that at all. The American slaves were treated worse than animal, worse than cattle. You could do anything at all to them whatsoever, and there was absolutely no consequence. Whether that's an old man, whether that's a young man, whether that's a baby, you could do anything you want to. You could eat them, which they have. You could violate them, which they did. You could do anything you wanted to, and there was no consequences. So it's not the same whatsoever.
New York Times 1619 Project. Students are taught that America's slavery was unlike anything that existed before.
We're the worst society ever. We've done things that no one else has ever done. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with acknowledging your historical mistakes. I mean, I'm Black, Irish, a bit Native American, at least per the family lore.
Okay. First off, he says sometimes it's not wrong with acknowledging your historical mistakes. You see how the words he's using is belittling the situation. Sometimes it's not that bad. Well, it is. And this is the bedrock. This is the foundation on which the whole entire country was built off of. And then this dude is trying to make it seem like, he started off saying he's Black, Native American, and Irish. This man he does not look like he's a mix of any of those things whatsoever. He might be Irish. I can see him being Irish, to be honest. Maybe, I don't know. He doesn't even really look that Irish, to be very honest with you. But they always they do this because it takes away to them. They make an excuse. Well, hold on. I am 14% Black. So you can't say that I'm being racist because I am 14% Black. I do have Black DNA somewhere in my body. So you know what I'm saying? I can't be racist. So this man said he's a third Black. He does not look a third Black or anything unmelanated whatsoever. He doesn't.
I mean, those are three peoples that have experienced a great deal historically. Nothing wrong with acknowledging that. But it's extremely odd to focus only on the negatives of your society and to exaggerate those.
Americans are taught that.
Okay, and here, who is exaggerating? See? Focus. And this is the excuse that they make anytime we discuss slavery. Oh, well, we can't focus only on the negatives. We can't focus only on the negatives and then exaggerate. What is exaggerated? To be very honest with you, there's so much stuff that happened during the slavery era that we still don't know about, that was undocumented, that was forgotten, lost in history, that we will probably never find out about how horrific slavery was. We will probably never find out the true extent of how horrific slavery was. That's just the honest truth. So nobody is exaggerating anything. Nothing we said happened to slaves was made up. We're not saying these things were made up. A lot of people are just finding out about how bad it was. Nobody's making anything up. Nobody's exaggerating or embellishing anything. And then you want to say, well, you focus only on the negatives about it. Well, you have not done anything to fix the negatives. You have not done anything whatsoever. The negative era of slavery, it still affects us today. It is still a very much so big factor in the way America currently runs today. So you can't say, well, you know, you focus only on the negatives and on the positives. When was our positive? Our positive as the descendants of slaves, we didn't get that. We didn't get that, especially in comparison to dominant society. We did not get that whatsoever. So you mean to tell me we can't fix the problem because when they make the excuse, oh, we can't only focus on the negatives, you don't fix problems unless you focus on those problems. The only way to somewhat, and it's not like it can be like completely fixed necessarily, but the only way to do some good in repairing the damage that is done is through reparations. That's the only way. Y'all don't want to pay no reparations, but you want to tell us we need to forget about everything. Okay, it's a long time ago. We're not going to do anything to fix it, even though it's still harming you. But well, it happened a while ago. No, we're not going to let it go, because the wealth that was generated through slavery still exists. There's still people who are rich currently. There's still businesses, there's still corporations, there's still organizations that are rich currently. We can talk about Chase Bank, we can talk about Wells Fargo, we can talk about pretty much all of these American banks and insurance companies. We can talk about all of them stemming from slavery. We can talk about the Wall Street, all of that stuff stemming from slavery, which they make all this money off of. So they're still benefiting off of slavery while they're telling us it happened a long time ago and we shouldn't focus on the negatives, but they get to enjoy the wealth of it. So this is why we focus on that, because y'all still making money. Y'all still literally gaining wealth off slavery while you're telling us it happened a long time ago and we should just let it go and ignore it.
Slavers caught people in Africa and shipped them here. But few were taught that most slaves were not shipped to the United States.
Between 10.7 million and 12 million slaves from Africa went to the New World. We got a little under 400,000.
Under 400,000 out of 10 million.
The extreme focus on slavery in the United States, why did that happen? One reason is that a lot of black people survived here. Slavery was harsh, but it's a lot.
Well, no. I mean, here's the thing. That doesn't really matter where they dropped them off. That doesn't really matter. We are in the United States of America. So that's why it's an extreme focus on slavery in the United States of America, because we are living in the United States of America. I would assume that if you were going back in like Haiti or Jamaica or whatever, where they had slavery, they would make their slavery in their country be the primary focus. Why would we in the United States of America focus more on some other country's slavery than on the slavery that existed in this country? That doesn't even make sense. It doesn't matter where most of the ships drop people off at. And it's already historical and scientific evidence that there were black people who have already been here prior to the transatlantic slave trade. So there was a lot of black people who were here that were enslaved along with the black folk who came during the transatlantic slave trade. But what he's saying, it doesn't matter. Why does that matter? It doesn't matter whatsoever.
Less harsh than clearing the Brazilian jungle.
All right, but American blacks are at a disadvantage. They have less capital, financial and educational capital. What's the harm in pointing out how abusive white people were?
The harm is that pointing out how abusive white people were is not going to get black Americans any more capital. Most of the problem.
Now, here's my thing. While we're saying that, what's the harm of pointing out how abusive white people were? Notice he used the word were, past tense, were, as if this is still not an ongoing issue, as if the system of white supremacy does not exist anymore and racism does not exist anymore. And this is a thing of the past. And we're just acknowledging the past because we don't have any capital. And you see the facial expression. He's kind of saying it in a very mocking way. Well, they don't have capital, intellectual, or no. You guys have redlining, the Highway Act, eminent domain, just straight up burning towns down, flooding towns. That's why it's not the harm that used to exist. It's what you guys are doing now. Even now, when a black family tries to appraise their home is valued less if the appraiser knows that the home is owned by a black family. And the same exact home will have a higher rate, higher money, more money if they believe a white family owns that home. That is currently today. That's in the modern time today. So this is not something in the past where why can't we just acknowledge how bad they were? No, we're not just acknowledging how bad the slave owners were. We are acknowledging the system that still exists today, that existed back then. We are acknowledging the system of white supremacy, because the system of white supremacy did not go anywhere when slavery technically ended. It did not go anywhere. It did not get less severe. It did not become easier. None of these things happened. So the same system that existed during the time of chattel slavery is the same exact system that exists today. And in order to fix that, you have to acknowledge all of what they do, all of everything. This isn't, well, we don't have any money now, so let's talk about 100 years ago, even though everything's fixed. No, nothing has been fixed. And the same system that oppressed, subjugated black folk before is the same system that does it currently. So let's listen to what he has to say about it.
Of the modern black community don't have anything to do with historical ethnic conflict 160 years ago.
The Great Society.
Okay, and he's talking about a historical ethnic conflict 160 years ago. First off, it does. The effects of building an entire country off of slavery, spanning centuries of slavery. And you mean that the whole country's built off of? The whole country's built off of anti-black slavery. And you mean to tell me that still has no effect at all? Even though all researchers, all historians, everybody acknowledges that. And then I don't like the fact that he used the word ethnic conflict. No, this was not ethnic conflict. This was white supremacy. This was not two ethnicities having a feud or battling things out. This was one creating a racial hierarchy and oppressing another race. That's what this was. These words that he's using are to belittle the significance of it.
I asked not how much, but how good.
Reilly says most of the problems began when welfare began.
Crime in the black community, every time I've tried to break this out, increased about 800% between, say, 1963 and 1993. Racism didn't increase between 1960 and the modern era. You're looking at the impacts of the Great Society, the welfare programs.
Reilly argues it's better to teach the truth, that almost every society had slavery.
Now, we're going to get into the whole welfare thing. Maybe y'all like, well, no, it's all of this is welfare. The fact that you guys don't have any capital and everything, that's welfare. And this is why it's very important for us to know history. It's not just welfare that was going on, because welfare was not something that specifically happened to black people. Welfare was something that black people could apply for, but black people were not the only people who could apply for it. Welfare was a whole thing to help people of low income. So there were whites on welfare, there were blacks on welfare, there were a lot of different groups of people who were on welfare, who were getting government assistance. It was not just the government assistance for black people. The reason why we don't have capital is because the dominant society made sure that we did not. Right after slavery, when we wanted to have our own neighborhoods and we wanted to have our own societies, they came and they blew it up. We can't forget about Tulsa, Oklahoma, which they never want to acknowledge the fact that we would be a lot better had you not bombed whole towns of people. that were not messing with your towns at all. And that didn't happen to any other race of people, any other ethnicity of people. That only specifically happened to our people, and they completely got away with it. Bombing whole towns, lynching business owners, flooding whole towns, and then even more to the modern era, you still had redlining. You still kind of technically do have redlining, to be very honest. You had redlining that prevented people from being able to acquire any type of capital, acquire any type of wealth whatsoever, and generate any type of wealth. You had soldiers coming back from wars, and they were being denied the access to their GI Bill. Now, the white soldiers, they were able to use their GI Bill to the fullest. The black soldiers were not able to do that. Now they want to talk about, well, the welfare system, that's why you guys don't have anything, but they never factor in that. They never factor in the Highway Act, where they just completely ran through entire black neighborhoods, black stores, decimated the community whatsoever. They never talk about eminent domain. Do you understand that the Central Park in New York City, that used to be a flourishing black neighborhood? And they said, you know what? Y'all got to go. We taking everything. And they just took it. And this is something that happens all of the time. So when they talk about welfare, you guys essentially orchestrated the condition that kept us in such a deprived state that we would even be eligible for welfare. I want you guys to really understand, black society would not have even been eligible if we were just left alone. If we were left alone and we had our black Wall Streets, and I'm not just talking about Tulsa or Rosewood, I'm talking about just all around the country. If we were just left alone with our Wall Streets, if we were just left alone with our homes, or left alone with our towns, if we were just left alone, we wouldn't even be eligible for any type of government assistance or welfare. We would be flourishing and we would be fine. But they did not let that happen. This is one of the reasons why in the civil rights movement, originally, before it became integration, it was desegregation, because the dominant society had free access to everything, free access to this, but black society were boxed in to the poorest of the society. We had to pay taxes to everything, the state and everything, but we were boxed in and restricted to the poorest part of society. That's what they did. When it comes to us and we built our own stuff, they tore it down, and then they forced us into the poorest part of society. And there's a long history with that, but no, it's not welfare. That I took the long way to explain that it's not welfare, because there's a lot of other conditions and a lot of other factors that nobody wants to acknowledge or admit, that even still exist today. I just talked about how a black family, if they try to appraise their home would be appraised for less money than if it was owned by a white family. So we're not going to play this game and act as if it was only welfare, and if you guys would just get a job and stop relying on the government, you would be in a better position. Because you're ignoring all of the other factors that they have put in place to keep us in that position. Let's continue.
The Aztecs, the Persians, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Vikings, and most of all, the Arab world.
The Arabs were probably history's premier slave traders.
Sometimes they captured poor whites from Slavic countries.
The Muslims, many of whom were dark-skinned or even black, took so many blonde slaves out of this region that they gave the word slave to the global slave population.
Many slaves were forced into harems.
Sexual slavery was very much a part of slavery. Like if your group was defeated in war, the men would probably just be killed or they'd be sold as farmhands. The women would often be sold as harem girls or prostitutes.
More than 1 million Europeans were enslaved, but Muslim slave traders took more people from Africa.
The Arabs targeting Africa took out about 17 million people.
The British and then the Americans.
Now, they bring this up. This got nothing to do with what we talking about in America. The United States of America created a condition of slavery that was unique to the world, that did not exist prior. It did not exist prior whatsoever. It is not comparable to anything else. You bringing up there was slavery all over the world, That is a well-known fact that there was slavery that existed in other countries before. That is a well-known fact. That has nothing literally to do with what we're discussing or to do with our reparations claim. That just because it happened bad 100 years ago in a completely different country, what does that have to do with us? Because nobody's making the argument that there was no slavery in the world before America. Nobody has made that argument.
Were the rare people who moved to abolish slavery.
So yeah, the British Navy, in a story almost no one now knows, sank something like 1,600 slave ships. It freed 150,000 people that were enslaved at the time.
Because the Brits objected for moral reasons.
Yeah, they'd had enough of it.
Saudi Arabia.
He bring this story up. There's no type of receipts, no type of nothing. He don't know the captain's name. Nobody knows the story whatsoever. Nobody knows the story. And then you talk about the Brits objected for moral reasons. All of them Europeans was knee deep in slavery. Anybody who had a hand in it, anybody who could benefit from it, they was all in on it. None of them was all like, this isn't moral at all. What are you talking about? There were some of the first people involved in the slave trade in this country, even before this country became the United States of America. There were some of the first, the first people involved in this. What are you talking about? They objected for moral reasons. And they saying sank 600 something slave ships. Okay. Sure. Okay.
Only abolished the slave trade relatively recently.
That's another inconvenient fact, right?
The Global Slavery Index estimates that even now, although slavery is officially illegal, there are more than 700,000 slaves in Saudi Arabia.
Where there were no Westerners, you'd have a lot of slavery for a long time.
Okay, so he's making it seem like the West is the moral. The West is moral. In the West, that is the reason why there's no slavery in America. And anywhere where the West, quote unquote, white folk are not, there's slavery that existed much longer. But it was the West that decided to abolish slavery because of morality. That's what he's saying.
And you do.
American slavery was horrible, but it wasn't unique. Our culture would be healthier if we learned about that. And schools dwelling on
it was unique. It was.
America's evils hasn't helped Americans get over them. Gallup polls show that after schools started focusing on oppression, race relations got worse.
Okay, look at this. Look at this. So this is some thing that says it somehow is supposed to calculate race relations, and the race relations were always good. It seemed like it was good because it's about just staying about 70%. Race relations were excellent for about 70%, all the way up until about 2000, and it looked like about 15 ish, where it took this huge drop because we started focusing on the actual history in the system of white supremacy. And they say that they make this excuse all the time. Well, hold on. If you acknowledge the bad, race relations is going to get worse. Race relations is going to get worse. So as Black people, we're supposed to be quiet, and we're supposed to just be happy to be subjugated. We're supposed to live in the system that oppresses us by our race, because of our race, and shut up about it and not say anything about it, because if you do, it will upset the oppressor class, and then that will worsen race relations. Race relations are fine. Notice that they always make it seem like race relations are fine when you don't make the oppressor class feel bad about racism. Race relations are never bad when they're doing something wrong. Race relations are always bad when we bring up that they're doing something wrong. Anytime, it's not, they are never to blame for the race relations being bad. We are only to blame because we are not sitting there and acquiescing and being quiet and being good servants and accepting the inhumane mistreatment of white supremacy. That's what he's saying.
The idea of generational slavery, the idea of slave trading, none of that was unique to America. And another thing, you don't need radicalism to critique the worst excesses of an existing system. All you need is incrementalism and honesty.
In a few weeks, I'll post a video about another of Reilly's myths, the claim that before Columbus, the native people were kind stewards of the environment.
I know every rock and tree and...
Okay. I don't even want to play that. I don't want a copyright strike or whatever the case is. So that ends that video. But we're not even going to get into the whole Native American thing, because now you're going to just try to justify just coming over here and just doing what you want to do because they were not kind. They were mean. Unlike you, unlike them. See, this revisionist history happens because they are opposed to reparations. And they understand in order to dismantle the system of white supremacy, reparations is going to be a big factor in that. And that's the system that they want to keep. So what they try to do is they try to belittle slavery, be all like, hold on, we can't, let's not act like slavery is this big of a deal, because when you act like slavery wasn't that big of a deal, it takes away from the momentum of reparations. You can't say we are owed reparations if you're trying to make slavery seem like it was some insignificant, small, brief little era in the past that really wasn't as bad as other places were. These are some tweets from this author named Wilfred Reilly. Wilfred Reilly had some tweets, and this is what he has to say about reparations. The problem with the argument that the slaves are long dead, but the post-slavery racism was severe enough to be the real basis for reparations is that there is no reason this does not apply equally to natives, Irishmen, the Chinese, the Japanese Americans, etc. Okay, first off, those people, now when you talk about the natives, there were a lot of black people who were natives who were just considered Negroes, that were just reclassified as Negroes. That's history that's been well documented. Science has also verified that as well too. And they've gotten a lot, the 5 civilized tribes, they've gotten reparations. Actually, everybody that you've mentioned has gotten reparations. And when you talk about Irishmen, Chinese, Japanese Americans, not only did they get reparations, they also voluntarily immigrated here. They came to America because they felt this country was better than their country. They came for a job opportunity or some other reason, but they volunteered to come here. They were not bought here. They were not here before, and they were not bought here. So it doesn't, no, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing, on top of the fact that they have already been given reparations. Everyone he just mentioned was given reparations. Another tweet he made: in order to justify reparations for specifically slavery, what would have to be established is that Black Americans would be better off had our ancestors remained in Africa following military defeat. First off, our, he said our, ain't no our. He's not one of us. He's not a part of our lineage. That's number one. Number two, there was, like I said, and this is why it's important to know history. Like I said, it's been well documented. Pretty much all historians can contest to this, and science can attest to this as well too, that there were Black people here centuries prior to 1619, centuries prior to the transatlantic slave trade. It'd be hard pressed to find a historian who would disagree with that as a fact. And two, this comes from the argument of, well, I mean, we can't give you reparations because we actually really did you a favor. To be honest, we actually really did help you. To be very honest with you, it's better to be an American slave than to be in Africa, right? I mean, you could be stuck in Africa. At least you're not stuck in Africa. So to be very honest with you, we did you the favor. You should be thanking us. That's I mean, we'd have to establish that. No, it does not have to be established. Because in the tweet he made prior, when he was talking about the Japanese, Irish, and all of them, they getting reparations, which they have, did they have to establish that Japan they would have been better off in Japan, or they wouldn't have been better off in Japan. No, they didn't have to establish that. No other group of people who's received reparations had to establish that American colonization or American slavery was worse off than what they were living in before. No, you did something to a group of people, and now you have to repay that. You have to repay the damage that you have done. They don't have to, even if we all did, 100% of us came from Africa, we don't have to establish that we would be better off in Africa. We don't have to establish that at all. Whether we were or weren't, you guys did harm. The American system did harm, and they need to pay. Then you have this one. It says, I honestly can't think of anything more likely to cause an actual race war than reparations. See these vague threats that they make as far as reparation. Well, hold on. It's gonna cause, if we give y'all money, it's gonna cause a race war. If we start giving y'all reparations money, it's gonna cause a race war. Y'all just got to be oppressed happily, because if you guys upset them, it's gonna cause a race war. He continues to say, imagine being Appalachian or Spanish guy and seeing your identical circumstances black buddy for the old team get $5 million for nothing. Does the relationship survive? Multiply by 20 million. Okay, I'm gonna say this. If the relationship dies because we are paid our debt, then that's a relationship that needed to never exist. Yeah, we don't need that relationship. We don't need a relationship of our debt being paid makes them not want us to be friends, ruins our relationship. Good riddance to that relationship. It's good. That relationship needed to go a long time ago. That relationship needed to never be started. That's what the truth is. Yeah, that's the truth. That relationship needed to never have been started. And to be very honest, equally circumstances, no. The Spanish guy, the Appalachian, they're not in equal circumstances. These people are not in equal circumstances, because if you were in equal circumstances, you would be owed reparations, but you're not owed reparations. So by definition, you are not in equal circumstances. We are in these circumstances because only our group of people were slaves in this country, only us, and we are the ones who are still paying the effects of that, while you have the dominant society still gaining wealth off of that. So we are not in identical circumstances. They make it seem like somebody who might not be rich, someone who is poor, is the same as being black. No, there is not a poor white man in America who say, would you rather be a poor black man? No, because that'd be the same thing. No, they would all say, no, it's not the same damn thing. It is not the same thing. They don't want to do that because they know it's not the same thing, and they are not owed anything. Talk about a race war. So what if we get our money and our relationship don't last, that's going to lead to a race war. So we got to make them happy. We got to all suffer because we don't want to make other people happy because they can't get no money. No. These vague threats about it's going to be a race war. We're going to be a race war. Well, we're going to be the richest ones in this race war when you give us our reparations, then. You're not going to deter me giving these vague threats about a race war for somebody who broke. No. I want you guys to understand, they are doing this because they fear reparations. This is because they are afraid of reparations. This is because they fear where the movement is going. If they honestly believed that reparations was something we could never accomplish, it was never a realistic goal, it was never anything that we can honestly, realistically accomplish, they would not be talking about it. John Stossel, Frederick Reilly, they would not be talking about it. They would not be writing books about it. They would not be making YouTube videos about it. They would not be having conversations about it. They would not be doing anything because they would feel like it doesn't matter. They would feel like they're never going to get it. If we said, you know what we want to do is we want to get all of us, the Descendants of Slave Foundation Black Americans, we want to get all of us and we want to put us on a spaceship and send that spaceship to Jupiter, and we're going to live on Jupiter. Do you think that they would be making YouTube videos about it? Do you think that they would be making books about it, having conversations about it? No, because that's unrealistic. And they would say, you know what, we don't even need to pay this any attention, because that's so far-fetched. That's never going to happen. We don't even need to think about it. We don't need to rebut this. We don't need to debunk it or refute it or counter it or anything, because that's never going to happen. We could just let them believe what they want to believe. That would never happen. That's how they would respond if they honestly believed that what we are trying to get could never happen. That's how they would respond. But they are not responding that way, because they believe that reparations is a true threat. They believe that the movement of reparations is going to grow to a point where they cannot control it anymore. That's why they're trying to get ahead of it. That's why they're trying to belittle slavery. That's why they're trying to talk about, well, if you gave us reparations, you got to give it to an Irishman who voluntarily came over here and actually got a whole lot of benefits from coming over here. That's why they're trying to put all these barriers and obstacles in the way of reparations, because they believe it's a threat. They wouldn't do it if they didn't. They would not do that if they did not believe reparations was a realistic threat that is coming soon. Family, I want to know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. What do you think about the video? What do you think about the whole argument of trying to belittle slavery? What do you think about that? Let me know that in the comment section below. Also, follow me on my various social media platforms. That is Afro Elite on Instagram, and then The Afro Elite on Twitter, but X. All right. The link to both of those are in the description below. Please, before you all leave, do not forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. Very important. Hit that notification bell. Very, very important. I appreciate you all, because this helps the reach and the growth of the channel. Thank you guys for everything you do. Now, with that being said, B1 salute to every single last one of you all. And of course, you all have a good one.